The galaxy had been at war for 3,000 years. The Collective, a union of 12 alien species, had fought against the Empire since before the first humans had learned to make fire. They were conquerors. They moved from system to system, taking worlds, enslaving populations, and stripping planets of every useful resource. They were tall, skinned creatures with 4 arms and eyes that could see in complete darkness. Their ships were massive, their weapons were powerful, and their numbers seemed endless. The Collective had lost more battles than they had won. They had lost more worlds than they had saved. Every year, they pushed deeper into their territory. Every year, more species joined the list of the extinct. The leaders of the Collective met on the station called Last Hope, and the name had become less symbolic and more literal with each passing decade. Admiral of the stood before the gathered representatives. They were small beings with blue skin and large eyes. They were brilliant strategists, but even their best minds had failed to stop the advance. Looked tired. They all looked tired. "We have received a transmission from a previously unknown species," said. "They call themselves humans. They come from a small planet in an unexplored region of the Outer Arm. They have achieved faster-than-light travel only recently, perhaps 50 of their years ago." The representatives murmured among themselves. New species were rare. Most had either been conquered by the or had chosen to hide from the war entirely. "Why do they contact us?" asked representative of the. There were large, stone-like creatures who moved slowly but thought deeply. "They want to join the fight," said. Silence fell over the chamber. Then slowly, laughter began. It started with the who were known for their sense of humor, but it spread quickly. Even who rarely showed emotion made a sound that might have been amusement. "A species that has been in space for 50 years wants to fight the," said commander of the. There were elegant beings with silver skin and voices like music. "We have fought them for 3,000 years and we are losing. What could these humans possibly offer?" Raised a hand for silence. "I had the same reaction, but I have reviewed the data they sent us. I have studied their history, their biology, their technology, and I believe we should hear what they have to say." The representatives agreed, though most of them did so only out of curiosity. They expected nothing from these humans. They were simply interested to see what kind of creature would be foolish enough to volunteer for a losing war. 3 weeks later, a human ship arrived at Last Hope Station. It was small by galactic standards, roughly the size of a patrol vessel. The design was crude but functional. The representatives gathered in the greeting chamber to meet these strange new beings. The airlock opened and the humans walked out. There were 5 of them. They were tall, taller than the but shorter than the. They had only 2 arms and 2 eyes, and their skin came in various shades of brown and pink. They wore simple uniforms and carried themselves with a confidence that seemed out of place for such a young species. The leader stepped forward. She was a woman with dark hair and dark eyes. Her name was Captain Maria Santos, and she had been chosen to represent humanity at this meeting. "Thank you for receiving us," she said. Her translator device turned her words into the common tongue. "We know our species is young. We know we have much to learn, but we also know that they will come for us eventually. They will come for our planet and our people. We would rather fight now, alongside allies, than wait alone for the end." Admiral nodded slowly. "Your courage is admirable, Captain, but courage alone will not win this war. They have technology that is centuries ahead of yours. Their ships are faster, their weapons are more powerful, and their soldiers are stronger. What can your people offer that we do not already have?" Captain Santos smiled. It was a strange expression, the representatives thought. They did not smile, neither did the or the, but there was something about this human expression that seemed both warm and dangerous at the same time. "Let me tell you a story," she said. 200 years ago on our planet there was a great war. 2 groups of humans fought each other with weapons that could destroy entire cities. One group had more soldiers, more resources, more technology. They should have won easily. But the other group had something else. They had the will to keep fighting when all hope was lost. They had the ability to adapt to any situation. They had the creativity to find solutions that no one else could imagine. And in the end, they won. The representatives listened, but they did not seem impressed. They had heard similar stories from other species. Every civilization believed it was special. Every civilization believed it had some unique quality that would save it from the. None of them had been right. "With respect, Captain," said Commander, "we have heard such claims before. The believed their speed would save them. The believed their strength would protect them. We have all been proven wrong." "I understand," Captain Santos said. "So let me prove it instead. Give us one battle, one engagement against the. Let us show you what humans can do. If we fail, you lose nothing but a few ships that you can spare. But if we succeed, you gain an ally that will fight beside you until the war is won." The representatives looked at each other. The request was reasonable. They had lost so many ships already that a few more would make little difference. And there was something about this human, something in her eyes that made them hesitate to refuse. Admiral made the decision. "Very well, Captain. We will give you your battle. There is a supply convoy that will pass through the system in 12 days. It is guarded by only 3 warships. We have attempted to intercept it twice and failed both times. If your people can succeed where we have failed, we will welcome you into the collective." Captain Santos nodded. "Thank you, Admiral. We will not disappoint you." As the humans returned to their ship, the representatives discussed what they had seen. Most of them expected to never see these humans again. They were too powerful. The convoy was too well defended. These newcomers would learn the same lesson that so many others had learned before them. But Admiral was not so sure. There had been something in that human's eyes, something that reminded him of the old stories. The stories spoke of species that had risen from nothing to challenge the greatest empires. The stories spoke of wars that had been won not through strength or technology, but through will and creativity. Was old. He had seen many species rise and fall. He had stopped believing in miracles long ago. But as he watched the human ship disappear into the darkness of space, he felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt hope. The human fleet arrived in the system 4 days before the convoy was scheduled to pass through. There were only 6 ships in total. The largest was a cruiser called the Defiance. The others were smaller vessels, destroyers and frigates that the collective would have considered barely worth mentioning. To the humans, they represented a significant portion of their entire space force. Captain Santos stood on the bridge of the Defiance, studying the tactical display. Her crew moved around her with practiced efficiency. They had been in space for less than 50 years as a species, but they had learned quickly. Humans always learned quickly when their survival depended on it. "Commander," she said, "what do we know about the convoy?" Her second-in-command pulled up the data they had received from the collective. Commander James was a tall man with hair and calm eyes. He had served in the old wars on Earth before humanity had reached the stars, and he had learned lessons there that no alien could teach. 3 warships, he said. Each one is roughly twice the size of the Defiance. They have superior firepower, superior shields, and superior speed. The convoy itself consists of 12 transport vessels carrying supplies to the front lines. The collective attempted to intercept this convoy twice before. Both times, they lost more than half their ships and failed to destroy even one transport. The bridge crew listened in silence. The odds were not good. Anyone could see that, but they were humans and humans had faced worse odds before. "What did the collective do wrong?" Santos asked. Smiled slightly, "They fought fair." Santos nodded. She had studied the collective's tactics carefully. They were brilliant in their way, but they were also predictable. They fought according to rules that had been established over thousands of years. They engaged the enemy in direct combat, matching strength against strength. It was honorable, it was logical, and it was exactly why they were losing. "We will not fight fair," Santos said. "We will fight to win." Over the next 4 days, the human fleet prepared. They did not form a standard battle formation. They did not position themselves to engage the enemy directly. Instead, they scattered throughout the system, hiding behind asteroids and moons, using the natural debris of space to mask their presence. The collective observers watched in confusion. This was not how space battles were fought. This was chaos. This was disorder. This was doomed to fail. When the convoy arrived, they detected nothing unusual. Their sensors showed an empty system, just as they had expected. The 3 warships took their positions around the transport vessels, and the convoy began its journey through the system. The first attack came without warning. A human frigate, the small ship called the Lightning, emerged from behind an asteroid and fired directly at the engines of the lead transport. The shot was perfectly aimed. It did not try to destroy the ship. It simply disabled its propulsion system, leaving the transport drifting helplessly. The warships responded immediately, turning to engage the Lightning. But the frigate was already gone, disappearing behind another asteroid before they could lock weapons. Then came the second attack. Another human ship struck from a different direction, targeting a second transport. Again, the shot disabled rather than destroyed. Again, the attacking ship vanished before they could respond. The commander was confused. This was not how enemies fought. Enemies engaged in open combat. They did not hide and strike and run like animals. But the humans did not care what enemies were supposed to do. They only cared about winning. For the next 2 hours, the battle continued in this manner. The human ships appeared and disappeared, striking from unexpected angles, targeting engines and weapon systems rather than attempting to destroy ships outright. The warships chased them, but the humans were always one step ahead, using the terrain of the system against their enemies. Then Captain Santos gave the signal, and everything changed. The Defiance emerged from its hiding place directly behind the lead warship. The enemy's shields were weakest at the rear, and the Defiance fired everything it had at that single point. The first volley punched through the shields. The second tore into the hull. The third destroyed the engine core. The warship exploded. The remaining 2 warships turned to face the Defiance, but they had made a mistake. They had focused on the largest threat, forgetting about the smaller ships. The human destroyers and frigates emerged from their hiding places and attacked from all sides. It was not a fair fight. It was not an honorable fight. It was a massacre. When it was over, all 3 warships were destroyed. 8 of the 12 transports had been captured. The human fleet had lost only 1 ship, a frigate that had been caught by enemy fire while covering the retreat of a damaged destroyer. Captain Santos stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking at the wreckage floating through space. Her crew was celebrating around her, but she remained calm. This was only the beginning. "Send a message to Admiral," she said. "Tell him we are ready to discuss the terms of our alliance." The news of the battle spread through the collective like fire. For the first time in centuries, they had won a decisive victory against and they had won it with the help of a species that had been in space for less than a single lifetime. Admiral summoned Captain Santos back to Last Hope Station. This time, when she walked into the greeting chamber, no one laughed. The representatives looked at her with new eyes, seeing not a foolish young species but a potential savior. "How did you do it?" Commander asked. The question was genuine. They had studied the battle recordings, but they still did not understand what they had seen. "We changed the rules," Santos said. "You have been fighting the same way for 3,000 years. You meet them in open battle. You match your ships against theirs. You fight with honor and courage. But they do not care about honor. They only care about winning. So we decided to care about the same thing." Representative leaned forward. They moved slowly, but his voice was strong. "You speak of fighting without honor. Many would consider this shameful." Santos nodded. "On our planet we have a saying, all is fair in love and war. We do not fight for honor, we fight for survival. We fight for our families, our friends, our people, and we will do whatever it takes to protect them." The chamber was silent. The representatives were processing her words, trying to understand this strange human philosophy. For them, war had always been governed by rules. There were things you did and things you did not do. The idea of abandoning those rules was foreign and somewhat disturbing. But they were losing. They had been losing for 3,000 years. Perhaps it was time to try something new. Admiral made the decision that would change the course of the war. "Captain Santos, on behalf of the collective, I formally invite humanity to join our alliance. We ask for your help in this war against the Empire. In return, we offer you full membership in the collective, with all the rights and protections that entails." Santos smiled that strange human smile. "We accept. And Admiral, I promise you this. They have never faced anything like us before. They have conquered 1,000 species, but they have never conquered humans, and they never will." The alliance was formed. Humanity had joined the Galactic War, and nothing would ever be the same again. In the months that followed, humanity proved that the Battle of was not a lucky accident. They fought in a dozen more engagements, and they won almost all of them. But more importantly, they began to teach the collective how to fight in new ways. The first major change was in tactics. The collective had always fought in large formations, matching fleet against fleet in open space. The humans introduced a concept they called guerrilla warfare. Instead of massing their forces for major battles, they spread out, striking supply lines, attacking isolated outposts, and withdrawing before the enemy could respond. At first, the collective commanders resisted these changes. They had been fighting for thousands of years. They did not need young humans telling them how to conduct a war, but Admiral supported the humans, and slowly, reluctantly, the other species began to adopt their methods. The results were immediate. The advance, which had seemed unstoppable for centuries, began to slow. For the first time in living memory, the front lines remained stable for more than a single year. But tactics were only part of what humans brought to the war. They also brought something that the collective had never seen before, something that had no name in any alien language. They called it determination. There were brilliant strategists, but when a battle was clearly lost, they calculated the odds and made rational decisions. They were incredibly strong, but they were also slow, and they often surrendered when they saw no path to victory. Every species in the collective had limits, points at which they would accept defeat. Humans did not have this limit. In the Battle of the Narrow Pass, a human destroyer called the Ironside was caught alone against 2 cruisers. The ship was damaged. Its engines were failing. Its weapons were running low on ammunition. Any reasonable captain would have surrendered or tried to flee. Captain David did neither. Instead, he ordered his ship to charge directly at the nearest enemy cruiser. His crew did not hesitate. They had been fighting together for years, and they trusted their captain completely. The Ironside accelerated toward the enemy, taking hit after hit, its hull tearing apart around them. At the last moment, transferred all remaining power to the forward shields and rammed his ship into the enemy cruiser's bridge. The collision destroyed both vessels instantly, but it also gave the rest of the human fleet time to arrive and destroy the second cruiser. When the collective commanders reviewed the battle records, they did not understand what they were seeing. Why would anyone sacrifice themselves like this? The Ironside could have escaped. It could have surrendered. The crew could have lived. Captain Santos explained it to them. "We call it going down fighting. To us, there are things worse than death. Surrender when your friends are counting on you. Retreat when it means abandoning those who need you. Failure when you had the chance to succeed." David knew that his sacrifice would save his fleet. That was enough for him. The story of the Ironside spread throughout the collective. It became a symbol, a legend. Other species began to find something they had lost long ago. They began to find courage. The second major change humanity brought was creativity. The collective had been using the same basic ship designs for hundreds of years. Their technology was advanced, but it had become stagnant. Every problem had an established solution. Every challenge had a standard response. Humans did not think this way. When they faced a problem, they did not look for the established solution. They invented new ones. A young human engineer named Dr. Sarah developed a device that became known as the gravity spike. It was a weapon that the collective scientists said was impossible. It manipulated gravity itself, creating localized fields that could crush enemy ships or tear them apart. Doctor had created it in less than 3 months, working with materials and equipment that they considered primitive. When she presented her invention to the Collective Science Council, they were amazed. The head of the council, a physicist named Scholar, asked how she had developed something that their best minds had declared impossible. Doctor shrugged. "You told me it was impossible. I did not read that report, so I did not know I could not do it. Therefore, I did it." Scholar stared at her for a long moment. Then he began to laugh, a rare sound from a, "You did not know you could not do it," he repeated. "And so you did it. This is either the most stupid thing I have ever heard or the most brilliant." With humans, Doctor said, it is usually both. The gravity spike was deployed across the collective fleet. It gave them an advantage that they had never faced before. For the first time, the enemy's ships were not superior in every way. For the first time, the collective could fight on equal terms. But the most important change humanity brought was something even harder to explain. It was the way they connected with the other species. The way they formed bonds that went beyond alliances and treaties. They had always kept their distance from other species. They worked together when necessary, but they did not form personal relationships. They were even more isolated, preferring their own kind to all others. The various species of the collective cooperated, but they did not truly understand each other. Humans were different. They made friends. Lieutenant Commander Tors was assigned as a liaison officer to the warship Stone of Ages. The captain, a massive being named, did not want her there. He considered humans to be small, weak, and annoying. He tolerated her presence only because his superiors had ordered him to cooperate. 3 months later would have died for her. Tors had done nothing special. She had simply treated as a person rather than as an alien. She had asked about his family, his hopes and fears. She had listened when he spoke, really listened, not just waiting for her turn to talk. She had shared meals with him, learned his jokes, celebrated his victories, and mourned his losses. When Tor's ship was destroyed in battle and she was presumed dead, refused to leave the system. He searched for 3 days, ignoring orders to withdraw, until he found her escape pod drifting in the debris field. She had survived, barely, and carried her pod into his ship with his own hands. "Why?" Tors asked him later when she had recovered. "You could have been killed. You disobeyed direct orders." Stoneface did not change, but his voice was gentle. "You are my friend, Tors. Among my people, we say that a friend is a piece of your own heart walking in another body. I could not leave my heart behind." Stories like this began to multiply across the collective. Humans formed connections with beings that had never connected with anyone outside their own species. They broke down barriers that had existed for thousands of years. They created something new, something powerful, something that they could not understand and could not defeat. They created unity. 1 year after humanity joined the war, Admiral called a meeting of all collective commanders. The war room on Last Hope Station was full for the first time in decades. Every species was represented. Every fleet had sent its best officers. 1 year ago, said, we were losing this war. We had been losing for 3,000 years. We had accepted that defeat was inevitable. We were simply waiting to die. He paused, letting his words sink in. Today we stand at a turning point. The advance has been stopped. Their supply lines are under constant attack. Their commanders are confused and demoralized. For the first time in living memory, we have hope. Turned to Captain Santos, who stood beside him. This is because of humanity. They have taught us new ways to fight. They have given us new weapons and new technologies. But most importantly, they have reminded us why we fight. Not just for survival, but for each other. Not just for our own species, but for all the people of the collective. Santos stepped forward. Her uniform bore new insignia now. She was no longer just a captain. She was Fleet Admiral Santos, commander of the combined human and collective forces in the outer sectors. "They believe they are unstoppable," she said. "They have conquered 1,000 species. They have destroyed civilizations that existed before their empire was born. They believe that nothing in this galaxy can stand against them." She smiled that dangerous human smile. "They are wrong, and we are going to prove it." The war entered a new phase. No longer were the collective forces simply defending their territory. Now they were taking the fight to the enemy. They attacked supply depots. They raided shipyards. They struck targets deep behind enemy lines, places they had thought were completely safe. Fleet Admiral Santos led from the front. She did not sit in a command center far from the fighting. She was there, on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiance, which had been upgraded and expanded until it was one of the most powerful ships in the collective fleet. The High Command did not understand what was happening. For 3,000 years they had fought the same enemy. The collective was cautious, predictable, and weak. They defended their worlds and mourned their losses and slowly retreated. They did not attack. They did not innovate. They did not fight with the fury that they now faced. The Emperor, an ancient being named the Undying, summoned his generals to the throne world. He had ruled for 800 years, longer than any previous emperor. He had never known defeat. He did not intend to learn now. "Who are these humans?" he demanded. "Where did they come from? How do they fight the way they do?" His generals could not answer. They had captured human prisoners, but the prisoners would not talk. Even under torture, even facing death, they remained silent. Some of them even laughed at their captors. They did not understand this. When they captured members of other species, those prisoners always broke eventually. Everyone broke eventually. Except humans. One general named the Cruel offered his analysis. "They are insane, my emperor. They do not think like rational beings. They take risks that no sane creature would take. They sacrifice themselves for no logical reason. They fight when they should surrender. They attack when they should retreat. I have never seen anything like them." "Then destroy them," ordered. "Send the Death Fleet. Wipe their planet from existence. Without there, they will lose their will to fight." It was a strategy that had worked before. Many species had collapsed when they were destroyed. Without a home, without a center, they lost their purpose and their strength. The Death Fleet was the most powerful force the Empire possessed. 100 of their largest warships, carrying weapons capable of shattering planets. They had been used to end wars before. They had never failed. The fleet set out for Earth. But humans had learned something important in their time fighting They had learned that information was a weapon. They had placed spies throughout the enemy territory, using methods they never suspected. They bribed, they stole, they hacked into enemy communications. And they learned about the Death Fleet 2 weeks before it departed. Fleet Admiral Santos called an emergency meeting. All the senior commanders gathered on Last Hope Station, including Admiral, Captain of the, Commander of the, and dozens of others from every species in the collective. "The Death Fleet is coming for Earth," Santos said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with something fierce. 100 warships, more firepower than we have ever faced. They intend to destroy Maya and everyone on it. The room was silent. Everyone understood the implications. Earth was far from the front lines. To defend it, they would have to pull forces from other sectors, leaving those areas vulnerable. And even if they did, they might not have enough ships to stop the Death Fleet. Admiral spoke carefully. The logical response would be to evacuate Earth, save as many humans as possible and let the destroy an empty world. We could resettle your people on other planets. Santos shook her head. No, we will not run. Earth is our home. It is where humanity was born. It is everything we are. If we abandon it, we lose more than a planet. We lose ourselves. Then how do you propose to defend it? Commander asked. We cannot match the Death Fleet ship for ship. We would need every vessel in the collective, and even then, victory would not be certain. Santos smiled. It was the same smile she had worn when she first arrived at Last Hope Station, the smile that had made Admiral feel hope for the first time in years. We will not match them ship for ship, she said. We will do what humans have always done. We will change the rules. The plan she outlined was audacious. Some called it brilliant, others called it insane. Most agreed it was probably both. Instead of gathering all their forces to defend Earth, the collective would split their fleet. A small defensive force would remain to protect but it would be supported by something they had never seen before. Doctor's gravity spike technology had been developed further, creating a network of defensive platforms that could create gravity wells throughout the solar system, slowing and disrupting any attacking fleet. Meanwhile, the main collective force would launch an attack of their own, not on a supply depot or a shipyard, but on the throne world itself. It was the most heavily defended place in the galaxy. No one had ever attacked it. No one had ever dared. Until now. They believe they are safe, Santos explained. They have sent their death fleet to destroy us, leaving their home less protected than it has been in centuries. They think we will cower in fear, waiting for our end. They do not understand humans. They do not understand that we do not wait for death. We bring it to them. Captain slammed his massive fist on the table in approval. Yes, this is how we should have been fighting from the beginning. Not hiding, not defending, but attacking. Let them learn what it feels like to see their own world threatened. Not everyone agreed. The risk was enormous. If they failed, they would lose everything. But Santos pointed out that if they did nothing, they would lose everything anyway. At least this way, they had a chance. The vote was taken. For the first time in its history, the collective unanimously agreed on a course of action. They would attack. The preparations took 3 weeks. Ships were gathered from every sector. Weapons were loaded, engines were tuned, and crews said goodbye to their families, knowing many of them would not return. On the day of departure, Fleet Admiral Santos addressed her fleet. Her words were broadcast to every ship in the collective force, to every species, to every being who would fight alongside humanity. Today we fly into the heart of the enemy's territory, she said. Many of us will not return, but those who survive will tell the story of this day for 1,000 generations. They will say that this was the moment the galaxy changed. This was the moment when the Empire learned fear. This was the moment when the collective stopped being victims and became warriors. She paused, and her voice grew stronger. They have called us weak. They have called us prey. They have conquered and killed and destroyed, believing nothing could stop them. Today we prove them wrong. Today we fight for every world they have taken, every species they have destroyed, every life they have ended. Today we fight for the future. The fleet launched. Thousands of ships from a dozen species, flying together toward the greatest battle in galactic history. The war had begun its final chapter. The Death Fleet arrived at Earth expecting to find a terrified, defenseless world. Instead, they found a trap. The gravity platforms activated as soon as the ships entered the solar system. Space itself seemed to bend around them, pulling their vessels off course, slowing their advance. The smaller ships were thrown into chaos, colliding with each other as their navigation systems failed. And then the defenders attacked. The human fleet was small, only 50 ships against the Death Fleet's 100. But they were fighting in their home space, and they knew every asteroid, every moon, every pocket of debris. They used the terrain the way their ancestors had once used forests and mountains, hiding and striking and disappearing. The commander, Admiral the Cruel himself, was furious. He had expected a quick victory, a demonstration of power that would end human resistance forever. Instead, he was fighting for his life. For 3 days, the battle raged around Earth. The humans lost ship after ship, but for every vessel they sacrificed, they took 2 or 3 ships with them. The gravity platforms continued to disrupt enemy formations, and the defenders fought with a ferocity that they had never experienced. On the 3rd day, Admiral received devastating news. The collective fleet had arrived at the throne world. They were attacking the heart of the Empire. He faced an impossible choice: continue the attack on Earth and risk losing everything, or retreat to defend the throne world and admit defeat. For a long moment he hesitated. The had never retreated. It was against everything they believed. But then he looked at the battle data. He had lost 30 ships, 30 of the most powerful vessels in the Empire, destroyed by a species that had been in space for less than a century. If he continued, he might still destroy Earth, but he would lose the Death Fleet. And without the Death Fleet, the throne world would fall. For the first time in their history, they retreated. The defenders of Earth had won. Meanwhile, the collective fleet arrived at the throne world like a storm. The defenses were strong, but they had been weakened by the departure of the Death Fleet. And the collective was not fighting the way they had always fought. They were fighting like humans. Small attack groups struck from multiple directions, drawing defenders away from the main approach. Gravity spikes tore holes in the enemy formations. Electronic warfare systems, developed by human engineers, disrupted communications and targeting computers. They were not facing a single enemy. They were facing chaos itself. Fleet Admiral Santos led the assault personally. The Defiance was at the front of the formation, absorbing fire that would have destroyed lesser ships. Her crew fought with perfect coordination, each person knowing their role, trusting their captain absolutely. "All ships, this is Santos," she broadcast. "The enemy is weakening. Push forward. Do not let them recover. Today we end this war." The collective forces surged ahead. Ships exploded around them, filling space with debris and fire. The throne world grew larger in there, its massive orbital defenses becoming visible. But even as they fought, something unexpected happened. The civilian population began to flee. Transport ships launched from the surface, heading away from the battle in every direction. For 3,000 years, they had never known fear. They had always been the conquerors, never the conquered. Now they were running, desperate to escape the wrath of the beings they had dismissed as weak and insignificant. Emperor watched from his palace as his empire crumbled around him. He was 800 years old, and he had never imagined this moment. He had believed they were destined to rule the galaxy forever. He had believed nothing could stand against them. He had been wrong. Admiral and the remnants of the Death Fleet arrived too late. The orbital defenses had been destroyed. The collective forces surrounded the throne world. The war was effectively over. Fleet Admiral Santos sent a message to the Emperor. It was simple and direct. "This is Fleet Admiral Maria Santos of the human and collective forces. Your fleet is destroyed. Your defenses are gone. Your empire is finished. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. If you do not, we will bombard your world until nothing remains. The same mercy you showed to the species you conquered, we will show to you, which is to say, none at all." Emperor did not surrender. He could not. Surrender was not in his nature. Instead, he ordered his remaining forces to fight to the last being. They did, and they lost. The bombardment was precise. Military targets were destroyed, but civilian areas were left untouched. The humans did not want genocide. They wanted victory. There was a difference, one that they had never understood. When the smoke cleared, the empire was broken. Emperor was dead, killed when his palace was destroyed. His generals were captured or killed. His fleets were scattered and leaderless. The war that had lasted 3,000 years was finally over. The collective had won. In the years that followed, the galaxy was transformed. The species that had been conquered by the were freed. Worlds that had been dead for centuries were resettled. A new government was formed, one that included all the species of the old collective, plus many new ones who had been waiting for liberation. Humanity played a central role in this new order. They had proven themselves in battle, and they continued to prove themselves in peace. Human diplomats helped negotiate treaties between species that had been enemies for. Human engineers developed technologies that improved life for billions of beings. Human artists and writers created works that resonated across cultural boundaries. But most importantly, humans continued to do what they had always done. They made friends. Fleet Admiral Santos, who had led the final assault on the throne world, retired from military service. She became an ambassador, traveling from world to world, building connections between species that had never trusted each other before. She was famous throughout the galaxy, but she never let that fame change her. She remained the same person she had always been, someone who believed that every being deserved respect and kindness. Captain of the named his first child after Lieutenant Commander Tors, who had become his closest friend. It was the first time in history that a child had been named after a member of another species. It would not be the last. Doctor received the collective's highest honor for scientific achievement. She used the prize money to establish a research institute where scientists from every species could work together on problems that affected everyone. The institute produced breakthroughs that would have seemed impossible a generation before. Admiral lived to see the end of the war he had fought for most of his life. In his final speech before the new Galactic Council, he spoke about the day the humans had first arrived at Last Hope Station. "I remember thinking they were fools," he said. "A young species, barely out of their cradle, volunteering to fight in a war they could not possibly win. I gave them one battle expecting them to fail and disappear. Instead, they changed everything." He paused, looking around the chamber at the representatives of 100 species, united as they had never been before. The humans have a saying. They say that it is not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. I did not understand this at first. Now I do. The humans did not win because they were stronger than us. They did not win because they were smarter than us. They won because they refused to accept defeat. They won because they truly believed that they could change the galaxy. And they did. Smiled, something he had rarely done in his long life. The humans flipped the galaxy on its head, and I, for one, am grateful, because from where I stand now, the view is much better. The chamber erupted in applause, beings of every shape and size celebrating together. And among them, scattered throughout the crowd, were humans. They looked small compared to many of the other species. They had no natural weapons, no special abilities, no advantages that would have predicted their success. But they had something else. They had determination. They had creativity. They had the ability to connect with others, to form bonds that transcended species and culture and history. They had the stubbornness to keep fighting when all hope seemed lost. They were human. And the galaxy would never be the same again.